The champagne flutes clinked rhythmically as laughter echoed through the elegant downtown loft. String lights cast a warm glow over the crowd of well-dressed professionals, all gathered to celebrate another successful quarter at the firm. He stood near the corner, nursing a glass of sparkling water, watching his wife work the room with practiced ease. She had always been magnetic. That's what drew him to her 7 years ago, the way she could command attention without trying, her infectious laugh filling any space she entered. But lately, something had shifted. The charm that once felt inclusive now seemed designed to exclude him, to diminish him in front of others. "Oh, there you are." Her voice cut through the ambient noise as she approached with 3 colleagues in tow. Her cheeks were flushed from wine, her eyes glittering with something he couldn't quite name. "I was just telling everyone about your little hobby. You know, the model trains in the basement." The men chuckled politely. He forced a smile. "Just a way to unwind." "It's adorable, really," she continued, her hand landing on one of the colleagues' arms as she leaned inconspiratorially. "Like having an overgrown child in the house. But I suppose every woman needs a project, right?" The comment landed like a slap. He felt his jaw tighten, but he said nothing. This wasn't new, not anymore. Over the past 6 months, these little jabs had become routine. At first, he tried to laugh them off, to be the good sport she seemed to want him to be. But each comment carved away another piece of his dignity. "Honey, could you grab me another drink?" She thrust her empty glass toward him without looking, already turning back to her audience. He took the glass, noting how her fingers deliberately avoided touching his. As he walked toward the bar, he heard her laugh again, that particular laugh that seemed designed to perform rather than express genuine joy. The bartender, a young woman with kind eyes, seemed to notice his expression. "Rough night." Something like that. He ordered his wife's usual, a dirty martini with extra olives, and a bourbon for himself. He rarely drank, but tonight felt like an exception. When he returned, she had moved to the center of the room, holding court with a larger group now. He recognized most of them, colleagues, clients, a few mutual friends from their early years together. She was telling a story, her hands gesturing dramatically. And then, she paused for effect, her eyes scanning the crowd until they landed on him approaching with her drink. "Then I realized I'd married someone who can't even hang a picture frame straight. We've had the same painting leaning against the wall for 3 months. More laughter. Someone muttered something sympathetic. He handed her the martini, which she accepted without acknowledgement, never breaking her narrative flow. "But honestly," she continued, her voice rising slightly as the alcohol loosened her tongue, "isn't that marriage? Just accepting that you're stuck with someone's mediocrity." The word hung in the air. Mediocrity. He felt something crack inside his chest, not his heart exactly, but the shell he'd been building around it, the protective barrier that had been telling him this was normal, that all marriages went through rough patches. He looked around the room at the faces watching her. Some were laughing, some looked uncomfortable, but all were focused on her performance. That's what this was, he realized. A performance. And he was the prop. She raised her glass high, swaying slightly. "You know what? I've been thinking," the room quieted, sensing something significant coming. "I could leave him right now if I wanted to. Just walk out that door and never look back." She laughed, expecting others to join in. Some did, nervously. Others shifted their weight, suddenly fascinated by their shoes. But he didn't laugh. He didn't move. He simply stood there, looking at this woman he'd loved for 7 years, and felt absolutely nothing. The anger he'd expected didn't come. Neither did the hurt. Just a profound, settling calm. "Then do it," he said quietly. The room went silent. She turned to face him, the smile still frozen on her face but confusion flickering in her eyes. "What?" "I said, then do it." His voice was steady, clear enough to carry across the now silent room. "If you want to leave, leave. The door's right there." Her laugh came out strangled, uncertain. "Oh, come on. Don't be so sensitive. I'm just joking around." "Are you?" He set his bourbon down on the nearest table with deliberate care. "Because you've been joking around for months now. Every dinner party, Every social gathering, every opportunity you get to make me look small in front of other people. So I'm calling your bluff. If you want out, get out." The color drained from her face. Around them, people had started examining their phones, their drinks, anything to avoid witnessing what was clearly no longer entertainment but the dissolution of a marriage in real time. "You're making a scene," she hissed, stepping closer to him. "No," he replied calmly. "You made the scene. I'm just refusing to be a part of it anymore." She glanced around at their audience, her performer's instinct struggling to regain control. "Everyone, he's had a long week at work. Stress, you know how it is." "Don't," he interrupted. "Don't make excuses for me. Don't explain me away like I'm the problem here. You stood in front of all these people and said you could leave me right now. I'm giving you permission. Hell, I'm encouraging it." Her hand reached for his arm, but he stepped back. The gesture was small but definitive. "Baby, please. Can we talk about this at home? We've been talking at home. Or rather, I've been trying to talk and you've been dismissing me, gaslighting me, telling me I'm too sensitive or that I can't take a joke." He looked at her clearly now, seeing past the makeup and the designer dress to the person underneath. "I'm done being your punching bag. I'm done being the comic relief in your life story." One of her colleagues, a senior partner at her firm, cleared his throat. "Maybe we should give you two some privacy." "No need," he said, his eyes never leaving his wife's face. "I'm leaving. You all enjoy the rest of your evening." He turned toward the door, and she grabbed his sleeve. "Wait. You can't just walk out like this." He looked down at her hand, then back at her face. "Actually, I can. You just spent the last 20 minutes telling everyone how easy it would be for you to do exactly that. Turns out it's even easier when you finally realize you deserve better." "Deserve better?" Her voice rose, defensive now. "I've given you everything. A home, a life, connections. You've given me humiliation," he said quietly. "Constant, calculated humiliation. And I let you because I loved you. But love isn't supposed to make you feel worthless." He gently removed her hand from his sleeve and walked toward the door. Behind him, he heard her voice crack, "If you walk out that door, don't bother coming back." He paused, his hand on the doorknob, and looked back one last time. She stood in the center of the room, surrounded by people but utterly alone, her face a mask of shock and anger and something that might have been fear. "I won't," he said simply, and left. The cool night air hit his face like a baptism. He stood on the sidewalk for a moment, breathing deeply, waiting for the regret or panic to set in. It didn't come. Instead, he felt lighter than he had in months, as if he'd been carrying an enormous weight and had finally been given permission to set it down. His phone buzzed. Her name lit up the screen. He declined the call and started walking. He walked for blocks, his mind surprisingly clear. The city lights blurred past as he replayed not just tonight but the last year of their marriage. How had he missed it? Or had he simply chosen not to see? The small criticisms that grew larger. The way she'd started going out without him more often. The subtle ways she'd begun excluding him from her life while keeping him around as a prop, a safe backup plan. His phone buzzed again. And again. He turned it off. By the time he reached their apartment, no, he corrected himself, her apartment soon enough, he had made several decisions. He would sleep in the guest room tonight. Tomorrow, he would call a lawyer. And he would not, under any circumstances, allow her to convince him this was salvageable. Some things, once broken, weren't meant to be fixed. The guest room was sparse and impersonal, decorated in the neutral tones of a space designed never to be truly inhabited. He'd slept here before, on nights when her snoring kept him awake or when they'd had arguments that left them both too raw to share a bed. But this felt different. Final. He sat on the edge of the bed, still in his dress shirt and slacks, and allowed himself to finally feel it. The grief, the anger, the profound sense of betrayal. Not just from tonight, but from all the nights before it. All the times he'd swallowed his hurt and told himself it would get better. All the excuses he'd made for her behavior. Around 2 a.m., he heard the front door open. Her heels clicked unsteadily across the hardwood floor. He heard her pause outside the guest room door, heard her breathing on the other side. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Then her footsteps retreated to the master bedroom. Sleep came in fits and starts. By 6 a.m., he gave up and showered, finding spare clothes he'd left in the guest room closet. When he emerged, she was in the kitchen, still in last night's dress, makeup smudged, making coffee. "We need to talk," she said without turning around. "We don't, actually." He grabbed his work bag from the hall closet. "Where are you going?" She turned now, and he saw the redness around her eyes. She'd been crying. To work. Then to a hotel. Then to a lawyer. A lawyer. Her voice cracked. Over one stupid comment at a party. He set his bag down and looked at her directly. "If you genuinely believe it was just one comment, then you're either lying to yourself or to me. Either way, I'm done." "I was drunk. I didn't mean it." "You meant every word. Drunk words are sober thoughts." He picked up his bag again. "I'll be back this weekend for my things." "Please," she said, tears spilling over now. "Please, can we just talk about this like adults?" "Like adults?" He laughed, the sound bitter even to his own ears. "You've spent months treating me like a child, like your personal servant, like an embarrassment you're forced to keep around. Now you want to talk like adults." She moved toward him, but he held up a hand. "Don't. Just don't." He left before she could respond, before her tears could erode his resolve. He knew her tactics, knew how she could cry on command when the situation called for it. He'd seen her do it to others, to her parents, to colleagues, to get her way. He wouldn't fall for it again. At work, he went through the motions, his mind elsewhere. During lunch, he called 3 divorce attorneys, settling on one who had strong reviews and, importantly, a female partner. He didn't want anyone suggesting this was about him being controlled or manipulated because of gender. This was about respect, plain and simple. His phone had 47 missed calls and twice as many texts. He blocked her number. That evening, at a generic hotel near the office, he finally allowed himself to check his email. Buried among the work messages was one from her, sent at 3 p.m. "I know you won't answer my calls. I know I messed up. But please, give me a chance to explain. There are things you don't understand. I love you. I've always loved you. Please come home so we can fix this." He stared at the message for a long time, looking for sincerity in the words. But all he could see was calculation. The right words deployed at the right time to achieve the desired effect. He'd fallen for it before. Not again. He archived the email without responding. The next morning, he received a call from their mutual friend, Sarah. Against his better judgment, he answered. "What the hell happened?" Sarah demanded. "She's calling everyone, crying, saying you abandoned her." "Did she mention what she said at the party?" "She said it was a joke that you overreacted to." "Of course she did." He rubbed his temples. "Sarah, I can't get into this right now. But I need you to understand, this wasn't about one comment. This was the final straw in months of her systematically humiliating me." "She says you're being dramatic." "Then believe her," he interrupted. "I really don't care anymore what story she's telling. I know my truth." He hung up before Sarah could respond. He needed to start cutting ties, even with people he cared about. If they chose to believe her version, that was their choice. That afternoon, while going through documents for the lawyer, he decided to check their cell phone records. He wasn't looking for anything specific, just documentation of the decline of their marriage. What he found made his blood run cold. Hundreds of messages to a number he didn't recognize, dating back 6 months. Unable to access the content through the phone records, he remembered her iPad, still synced to her iCloud account, still sitting in their apartment. He shouldn't. He knew he shouldn't. But something compelled him. That evening, he went back to the apartment while she was at work. The iPad was right where it always was, on the kitchen counter. He unlocked it with the passcode they'd always shared and opened her messages. The truth was somehow worse than any affair would have been. The messages weren't love letters to another man. They were worse. They were a systematic deconstruction of him as a person, shared with her friend Rachel, someone he'd always considered kind, someone they'd had over for dinner dozens of times. He scrolled back to 6 months ago, when the tone of his wife's behavior had first started to change. Rachel, so when are you going to leave him? His wife, I can't yet. Need to be strategic about it. He'd get half of everything. Rachel, girl, you make 3x what he does. Prenup. His wife, no, we were young and stupid. But I've been documenting everything. His inability to contribute equally to the household. Rachel, contribute? He does all the cooking and cleaning. His wife, financially, I mean. My lawyer said I need to establish a pattern of him being dependent on me. He felt sick. He sat down on the kitchen floor, the iPad trembling in his hands, and kept reading. His wife, I've been pushing him in social situations. Seeing how much he'll take before he snaps. Rachel, why would you want him to snap? His wife, because if he loses his temper, especially publicly, I can claim emotional instability. Maybe even get a restraining order. Then I keep the apartment, and he looks like the bad guy. Message after message detailed her strategy. How she'd been deliberately humiliating him to provoke a reaction. How she'd been flirting with other men in front of him to make him jealous, hoping he'd cause a scene. How she'd been documenting every minor disagreement, every forgotten errand, every human imperfection, building a case against him. The messages from last night made him want to vomit. His wife, I think I pushed too hard tonight. He actually walked out. Rachel, oh shit. Did he make a scene? His wife, not really. That's the problem. He was too calm. Just said I could leave if I wanted to, and then he left. Rachel, what are you going to do? His wife, damage control. I'll cry, apologize, say I was drunk. He always forgives me when I cry. Rachel, and if he doesn't? His wife, then I move to plan B, tell everyone he's been controlling, isolating me from friends. A few people saw him make a scene tonight, I can spin that. He took screenshots. Dozens of them. Every damning message, every calculated manipulation, every cold discussion of how to destroy him. His hands were shaking so badly he could barely hold the iPad. There was a noise at the door. She was home early. He stood up, iPad in hand, as she walked into the kitchen. She froze when she saw him, her eyes dropping to the device in his hands, the screen still showing her messages. That's private, she said, her voice sharp. Private. He laughed, the sound hollow. You've been planning to destroy me for 6 months, and you're worried about privacy. She recovered quickly, her face shifting into a mask of hurt. I can explain. Don't. He held up the iPad. I've already sent these to myself. Screenshots of everything. Every message where you detailed how you were deliberately humiliating me, provoking me, trying to make me lose control so you could paint me as unstable. The mask slipped. He saw the calculation in her eyes, watched her trying to find the right approach. You went through my private messages. That's a violation. Of what? Your trust. He couldn't help but laugh again. You've spent half a year systematically planning to gaslight me, manipulate me, and destroy my reputation, and you're upset about violated trust. I never meant, she started, but he cut her off. Yes, you did. Every word in those messages shows exactly what you meant. This wasn't about falling out of love or growing apart. This was calculated, cold, and cruel. You turned our marriage into a strategy game, and I was the opponent you needed to defeat. She tried a different approach, her voice softening. I was angry. I said things I didn't mean to Rachel. You know how women talk. Don't. His voice was steel. Don't you dare try to minimize this. You documented it. You planned it. You executed it. The only thing you didn't count on was me walking away before you could complete your plan. Where are you going? She asked as he moved toward the door. To my lawyer. These messages prove premeditation, manipulation, and fraud. They prove you've been creating a false narrative while deliberately sabotaging our marriage. You can't use those in court." Her voice rose, panic finally breaking through. "They were obtained illegally. We share an iCloud account. The iPad is mine too, bought with our joint account. I didn't hack anything, I used a device I have legal access to." He'd already checked with his lawyer that morning, anticipating he might find something. "But sure, have your lawyer argue that in court. I'm sure the judge will love reading about how you spent 6 months planning to manipulate the system." "Please," she said, and now the tears were real, born of fear rather than manipulation. "Please, can we talk about this? Really talk?" He looked at her, this woman he'd loved, who he'd built a life with, who he'd trusted completely. The worst part wasn't the betrayal itself. It was realizing she'd never really loved him at all. He'd been a placeholder, a safety net, someone to use until she was ready to trade up. "No," he said simply. "We're done talking. My lawyer will be in touch." "You'll regret this," she called as he reached the door. "No one will believe you. Everyone knows you walked out on me at that party." He turned back one last time. "Actually, everyone saw you humiliate me at that party. And when word gets out about why I really left, and it will get out, they'll know exactly who you are." 3 months later, he sat in a coffee shop across from David, one of the colleagues who'd been at that fateful party. The separation was nearly finalized. The division of assets settled out of court once her lawyer saw the messages and advised her that fighting would only make things worse. "I owe you an apology," David said, stirring his coffee. "That night, I thought you were being harsh. I had no idea what was really going on. You weren't the only one." He'd heard from several people in the weeks after. Once Sarah had heard the full story and, to her credit, told others the truth. The narrative his wife had tried to build had crumbled quickly when confronted with evidence. "She's been asking people at work to put in a good word for her," David continued. "Trying to get people to convince you to give her another chance. That ship has sailed." He took a sip of his own coffee. "How is she, though? Not that it matters, but I'm curious." David shifted uncomfortably. "Not great. She thought people would rally around her, that she could paint herself as the victim. But too many people saw those messages. She forwarded them to a few mutual friends, trying to get ahead of the story, but it backfired. People were horrified." He nodded. He'd heard similar things. The irony wasn't lost on him. In trying to destroy his reputation, she'd destroyed her own. The partner she was flirting with at the party? He pulled his business from the firm. Said he didn't want to work with someone capable of that kind of manipulation. David paused. "She might not make partner this year because of it. I'm not going to pretend that doesn't feel like justice," he admitted. "But mostly, I just feel relieved it's over." And he did. The anger had faded over the weeks, replaced by a profound sense of freedom. He'd moved into a smaller apartment, one that was truly his. He'd reconnected with friends he'd lost touch with, hobbies he'd abandoned. He'd started therapy to work through the gaslighting and manipulation, to rebuild his sense of self-worth. His phone buzzed. A text from his sister, "Still on for dinner tomorrow? Can't wait to see your new place." He smiled. His family had been supportive throughout everything, quietly furious at what his wife had done but respectful of his need to process it all at his own pace. "You seem good," David observed. "Better than I expected, honestly." "I'm good. For the first time in over a year, I feel like myself again." He finished his coffee. "I spent so long making excuses for her behavior, telling myself I was being too sensitive or that I needed to try harder. But the truth is, I was just being a decent human being, and she exploited that." "Have you heard from her directly?" "She tried. Letters, emails, showing up at my office once. But I've made it clear, there's nothing left to say. The lawyers are handling the last few details, and then we'll never have to speak again." David nodded. "For what it's worth, everyone who really knew you both, they're on your side." The party that night was eye-opening for a lot of people. We'd all noticed little things over the months, but we didn't want to get involved. We should have said something sooner. It wouldn't have mattered. I had to see it for myself. If someone had told me she was planning all this, I probably wouldn't have believed them. He stood, gathering his things. But I'm grateful people know the truth now. Makes the fresh start easier. They shook hands and parted ways. As he walked back to his car, he passed the building where the party had been held. He paused for a moment, remembering that night, the humiliation, the breaking point, the moment he'd chosen himself over the comfortable lie of his marriage. Best decision he'd ever made. His phone rang. Unknown number. He ignored it. If it was her using a different phone, he didn't want to know. If it was important, they'd leave a message. That evening, in his new apartment, he cooked himself a proper dinner, something he hadn't done in months. He'd forgotten how much he enjoyed it, how therapeutic it could be to create something with his own hands. He ate at his small table, looking out at the city lights, and felt genuinely content. Around 9 p.m., there was a knock at his door. He checked the peephole and saw her standing there, looking smaller than he remembered, her eyes red-rimmed and desperate. He didn't open the door. "I know you're in there," she called through the door. "Please, just give me 5 minutes. I need to explain." "There's nothing to explain," he called back. "Go home. I've changed. I'm in therapy. I understand now what I did wrong." "Good. That's a start. But it doesn't change anything between us. Please." Her voice cracked. "I love you. I made a mistake, but people deserve second chances." He leaned against the door, closing his eyes. For a moment, just a moment, he felt a flicker of the old him, the one who would have opened that door, who would have listened, who would have believed that love could conquer anything. But that man had been a fool. Love didn't conquer deliberate, calculated cruelty. Love didn't erase 6 months of manipulation. Love didn't rebuild trust that had been systematically demolished. "You don't love me," he said through the door. "You love the idea of not losing. You love the security I provided. You maybe even love the version of me you created in your head. But you never loved the real me, because the real me deserved better than what you gave." That's not true. It is true. And deep down, you know it. Go home. Move on. Find someone else to play games with. I'm done being a character in your narrative. He heard her slide down the door, heard her crying on the other side. Part of him wanted to feel guilty. But mostly, he felt nothing. The man who would have been destroyed by her tears was gone, replaced by someone stronger, someone who knew his worth. After 10 minutes, he heard her footsteps retreating down the hallway. He made himself tea, settled onto his couch with a book he'd been meaning to read for years, and began a new chapter, both literally and figuratively. 6 months after that night at the party, he ran into Rachel at a grocery store. She saw him first and tried to turn away, but he called out to her. "I'm not angry with you," he said when she reluctantly approached. "You were her friend. I understand loyalty." "I didn't know she would." Rachel trailed off. "I thought it was just venting. I didn't realize she was actually planning." "I know. But you also never told me what she was saying. You enabled it by staying silent." Rachel nodded, tears in her eyes. "I'm sorry. For what it's worth, I stopped talking to her. What she did was unconscionable." "It was. But I'm past it now. I hope you are too." They parted ways, and he realized he meant it. The anger, the betrayal, the hurt, it had all faded into something more like pity. Pity for someone so broken inside that they could treat another person that way. Pity for someone who would never understand what real love looked like. A year after the party, he was thriving. New job, new apartment, new life. He'd even started dating again, carefully, taking his time, but hopeful in a way he hadn't been in years. He heard through mutual acquaintances that she'd moved to another city, a fresh start away from the whispers and judgment. He hoped she'd find whatever she was looking for, as long as it was far away from him. Sometimes, late at night, he thought about that moment at the party. The silence after he'd called her bluff. The walk to the door. The freedom that came with choosing himself. He'd never regret it. Walking away from someone who treated him like he was worthless was the most valuable thing he'd ever done. Because he'd learned the most important lesson of all: you teach people how to treat you. And he would never again accept less than respect, dignity, and genuine love. The party had ended that night. But his real life? That was just beginning.